The lethality of their power is greater than ever. Their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. In earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
The mainstream media is so completely slanted. The owners of the Federal Reserve, who wield tremendous power internationally over the economies of the world. Now, we are fortunate to have former insider at the World Bank, ex-Senior Counsel Karen Hudes, come out as a whistleblower against the Federal Reserve Crime Syndicate. She says the financial system is dominated by a small group of corrupt, power-hungry figures centered around the privately owned U.S. Federal Reserve. The network has seized control of the media to cover up its crimes, too, she explained. In an interview with the New American in mid-May, Hudes said that when she tried to blow the whistle on multiple problems at the World Bank, she was fired for her efforts. Now, along with a network of fellow whistleblowers, Hudes is determined to expose and end the corruption, and she's confident of success. Well, I hope you, and I wish you all the best, and we've been trying to get this information out, and the more insiders that come out, we have to topple this house of cards. It is a house of cards. They're absolute criminals. They create wars and famines. This is what took Karen Hudes from a 21-year senior counsel at the World Bank to a whistleblower of corruption and evil.
Karen, you went to Yale Law School. You were the senior counsel for 21 years with the World Bank. Can you tell me why? What prompted you to become the whistleblower?
It was the right thing to do. I had to do it. That was my job. My job was to make sure that people played by the rules. It was a bank, and you don't play around when you're working at a bank. You follow the rules.
So what happened at the World Bank? When you became the whistleblower, you jeopardized everything that you worked for. Can you tell me what you saw? What happened that made you give up that 21 years that you've worked for?
I saw corruption. I saw that poor people weren't getting what was coming to them. They were starving. And the reason they were starving was that people were making sure that the money that was intended for the poor was lining somebody else's pockets. It started in the Philippines with the president of the Philippines, who was impeached, and he had to give back the millions of dollars that he stole. And when I saw that happening, and when the Supreme Court Chief Justice in the Philippines saw that happening, we were making sure that that wasn't going to continue. But that wasn't what people who were in management at the World Bank wanted. What they wanted was to keep the money flowing in the wrong direction.
So who did you go to? Who did you reach out to?
I did my job. I went to the people inside the World Bank, and I ultimately went to the audit committee of the World Bank, and I told them that we were failing in our job, which was to help the poor in the Philippines, and we were failing the government in the Philippines, who was trying to do the right thing.
So what was their response?
Their response was to cover everything up that needed to be disclosed.
So at that point, did you decide to go beyond the World Bank, beyond the people that you were working with? Did you reach out to the community that you were dealing with?
I followed the rules of professional responsibility for the legal profession, and I did what the Senate and the House of Representatives required at the World Bank. What they required was that any lawyer or accountant that saw that money was going in the wrong direction was supposed to disclose that up the corporate ladder, which is what I did. I went to the audit committee. It was only when people didn't do their job that I did what the requirement for lawyers is, and that is I ultimately went to the U.S. Congress, and I told them that there was corruption and that the lawyers were being prevented from doing their job.
At what point, because we know that you were let go, at what point did you feel your job was in jeopardy?
It was always in jeopardy, but that wasn't going to prevent me from doing what I had to do, because I was trained to do my job, and my job was simply to make sure that the information that the board needed so that they could do their job went to the board. A cover-up in a bank is a terrible thing because money gets spent where it's not supposed to go.
Now, we were told that an outside accounting firm was hired to come in and look at the books. What happened with that?
Yes, I spoke to the audit committee, and I told them that they needed to get an outside audit firm to come in. And what happened was the audit firm didn't follow the rules. There's something called the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board that put out rules for the accounting profession. And what ultimately happened was the man who was the controller at the World Bank put me in touch with the umbrella organization for accountants. That's the IFAC, International Federation of Accounting. And I told them everything that I told the U.S. Congress.
For the average person who's watching this right now, who may not totally comprehend the magnitude of the World Bank, can you tell me who was suffering with this corruption?
Everybody in the whole world, because the World Bank is an international cooperative that's owned by 187 countries, including the U.S. The U.S. has a 20% share. And when there's a breakdown in the rules at the World Bank, what this basically means is that the entire financial system is broken. And one of the terrible things is that it's not just the poor people, but it's also the securities markets in the whole world, because the World Bank issues bonds, $110 billion worth of bonds. 70% of those bonds are in dollars, and the rest are in all the currencies of the world. And when the accountants aren't keeping the books straight at the World Bank, you don't have confidence in the international monetary system. So you have to fix the problem. And I knew that if I let this problem go, there was going to be a currency war. I couldn't let it go. I was obligated. And the man who helped write the rules at the World Bank, the treaty, because 187 countries have passed their own legislation to belong to the World Bank. And he basically told me, he was the longest serving general counsel for 20 years. He gave me the operation manual. And he said that I couldn't let the world down. I had to do my job. Because if I walked away from that problem, we were going to have situations like Bernie Madoff in every single country in the world. And I couldn't let that happen.
You also had told me that it would jeopardize our standing within the world, in as far as, well, aren't we the ones who actually elect or help pick who's going to head the World Bank? And by not doing something about this, we were losing our credibility?
That's right. The World Bank was created in 1944 together with the International Monetary Fund. And for 66 years, everyone let the United States pick the president of the World Bank. But after we stopped playing by the rules, they said, no, we're not going to follow the gentleman's agreement anymore. The U.S. lost its credibility.
Now, Karen, you've told me that you've shown to me that you have documentation that has not been shown yet. I know you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawsuits that you have personally filed. Just recently, you've had a breakthrough with Congress. Can you tell me something about that?
Yes. Well, basically, it wasn't me who had the breakthrough. What I simply did was I told Congress what had to happen, and Congress asked the U.S. Government Accountability Office to do a study of the World Bank. And the World Bank refused. 3 senators, Senator Lugar, Leahy, and Bayh, asked for the U.S. GAO to find out what was going on. And the World Bank refused to answer the questions. Can you imagine? That's contempt of Congress.
We swap our currency, dollars, for their currency, euros. They take the dollars, lend it out to the banks in their jurisdiction. That helps bring down interest rates in the global market for dollars. And meanwhile, we're not lending to those banks, we're lending to the central bank. The central bank is responsible for repaying us.
So who got the money?
To financial institutions in Europe and other countries.
Which ones?
I don't know.
$500 billion and you don't know who got the money?
The loan went to the loans go to the central banks, and they then put them out to their institutions to try to bring down short-term interest rates in dollar markets around the world.
Well, let's start with which central banks got the money.
There are 14 of them, which are listed in our, I'm sure they're listed in here somewhere.
All right, so who actually made that decision to hand out $1 trillion that way, $500 billion? Who made that decision?
The Federal Open Market Committee.
Okay, and was it done at one time or in a series of meetings?
A series of meetings.
And under what legal authority?
We have a long-standing legal authority to do swaps with other central banks.
Do you happen to know anything?
It's not an emergency authority of any kind.
Anything specific about it?
Do you know my counsel says Section 14 of the Federal Reserve Act.
All right, we actually looked at one of the arrangements, and one of the arrangements is $9 billion for New Zealand. That works out to $3,000 for every single person who lives in New Zealand. Seriously, wouldn't it be better to extend that kind of credit to Americans rather than New Zealanders?
It's not costing Americans anything. We're getting interest back, and it comes back. It's not at the cost of any American credit. We are extending credit to Americans.
Well, wouldn't it necessarily affect the credit markets if you extend $500 billion in credit to anybody?
We are lending to all U.S. Financial institutions in exactly the same way.
Well, look at the next page. The very next page has the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate, which shows a 20% increase in the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate at exactly the same time that you were handing out $500 billion to foreigners. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Yes.
You can't let that happen. And so when the World Bank asked Congress for money, guess what Congress said? They said no. They said we're not going to give you a blank check. We have to make sure that the money is spent the right way. And if you're not going to answer the questions of the US GAO, we would be remiss if we appropriated that money. That happened on the 9th of March. That was the House Appropriations Committee.
So for all the people that are watching this video right now, what would you like them to do?
I would like them to do their jobs as citizens and hold their government accountable and make sure that they thank the Appropriations Committee for making sure that the GAO studies completed. And I would like to make sure that they hold their Congress people accountable, their senators and their representatives in the House. I'd also like them to learn what they need to know about the international monetary system, because they can't just leave it up to lawyers like me. They need to protect me. They need to get me back at the World Bank.
So bottom line here, if we do nothing about this, what's the end result?
The end result is that people won't know whether the dollar is going to stay the international currency. Because if the U.S. can't be counted on to play by the rules, why should they hold dollars? Why shouldn't their ministers of finance hold a different currency? And if the dollar loses its status as the international currency, this country is going to be in a very difficult, tight spot. We have to be credible. We have to be accountable. We have to follow the rules.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I'd like to thank all the people that have been helping me and standing behind me. And there have been a lot of them. Because they know that people that are on the firing line have to do their job.
So a World Bank insider blows the whistle on corruption in the Federal Reserve, and she's fired for her troubles. A former insider at the World Bank, ex-Senior Counsel Karen Hudes, said the global financial system is dominated by a small group of corrupt, power-hungry figures centered around the privately owned U.S. Federal Reserve. Hudes is determined to expose and end the corruption, and she's confident of success. Well, I hope you, and I wish you all the best, and we've been trying to get this information out, and the more insiders that come out, we have to topple this house of cards. It is a house of cards. They're absolute criminals. They create wars and famines. This is what took Karen Hudes from a 21-year senior counsel at the World Bank to a whistleblower of corruption and evil.
Karen, you went to Yale Law School. You were the senior counsel for 21 years with the World Bank. Can you tell me why? What prompted you to become the whistleblower?
It was the right thing to do. I had to do it. That was my job. My job was to make sure that
The lethality of their power is greater than ever. Their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. In earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
The mainstream media is so completely slanted. The owners of the Federal Reserve, who wield tremendous power internationally over the economies of the world. Now, we are fortunate to have former insider at the World Bank, ex-Senior Counsel Karen Hudes, come out as a whistleblower against the Federal Reserve Crime Syndicate. She says the financial system is dominated by a small group of corrupt, power-hungry figures centered around the privately owned U.S. Federal Reserve. The network has seized control of the media to cover up its crimes, too, she explained. In an interview with the New American in mid-May, Hudes said that when she tried to blow the whistle on multiple problems at the World Bank, she was fired for her efforts. Now, along with a network of fellow whistleblowers,